So a lot of you guys watching my channel are considering house hacking real estate in the Boston market. Now, you could be considering house hacking a multifamily or a condo, but one of the things that you're probably battling with is, how do I make sense of the numbers given the higher interest rates that we're seeing? So what I thought I would do in this video is break down the different financials that I'm seeing for a typical house hack for a 3-family, a 2-family, and a condo. That way you guys know what kind of financials you should expect and how to make sense of the numbers and whether it's even worth it to buy. So with that, let's get at it. What's going on, guys? My name is Lior and welcome back to my channel. Now, before we dive into the meat and potatoes of the video, two really quick things, guys. Number one, if this is your first time on my channel, first of all, welcome. Second of all, make sure you smash that subscribe button. I am still putting out tons of new videos every single week. I'm a real estate agent here in the Boston area, so I'm giving you guys thoughts all about the Boston market, different neighborhoods, financials, and everything you need to know. And number two, guys, if you're thinking about doing anything with real estate, whether it's buying, selling, investing, whatever it may be, I still get so many calls from you guys watching these videos, and I absolutely love it. So if you guys are thinking about doing anything, make sure you hit me up and I will definitely help you out. So with that, let's jump into the meat and potatoes. And as I said, what I'm gonna do in this video is break down the different financials for those of you that are considering house hacking, right? And by house hacking, I'm gonna define it real quick. Essentially what it means is you're gonna get an owner-occupant loan, right? Typically with a low down payment. For all these examples, I'm gonna say 10% down. And you're gonna basically live in one unit and rent out the others. And one other quick note too, for the sake of calculations, when I'm doing all these calculations for you guys for these different properties, when I say I'm including all expenses into our analysis, right? Especially on the multifamily side, I include literally all expenses, right? So I don't only include PITI, which is your principal, interest, taxes, insurance, but I'm also doing a budget for maintenance, vacancy, water and sewer, common utilities, snow and trash, right? So I'm basically taking a full operating expense budget, that's what I call that, and including it into our financials to make sure we have a true understanding of what really the financials are gonna look like. So that being said, let's dive into it. I've got my notes right here where I did some sample calculations for typical properties you guys are probably gonna stumble upon. So let's first start with house hacking a 3-family. So the scenario with a 3-family is this, right? Let's say your average property that you're gonna be looking at is gonna cost $1 million, right? Which is pretty spot on. And again, we're gonna be using a 10% down owner-occupant loan today to purchase that property. Now, let's say on this 3-family, you're gonna be inheriting 2 tenants, right? You're gonna live in one unit. The other 2 tenants, let's say on average, are paying about $2,200 per unit, right? Maybe a few $100s below full market rents, which is pretty typical in the multifamily game. Once you put those numbers out and you pencil out the calculations, the way it's gonna show is when you're house hacking, it's gonna cost you about $2,500 or so per month after accounting for all expenses to live in that property. And honestly, I would say this is pretty standard. Most 3-families that I've analyzed for clients over the last half a year or so with the new interest rates, typically it costs about $2,000 to $2,500 or so to live in the house hack property when you have 2 other tenants paying the rents. In the 2,000 to mid 2,000s per month, you're basically paying a little bit less than what it would probably cost you to rent in a similar type of unit. So you're getting a little bit of a deal there. But of course, the big thing is, when you're buying these buildings, you're controlling $1 million asset with very little money out. And of course, every single month, you're gonna be building out equity. When we look at the financials of what happens when you move out, say you decide to move out 1 or 2 years later, you rent out all 3 units, then basically with today's numbers, and again, with today's rates, you're probably gonna be cash flowing maybe a few $100s or so. Now, in terms of a cash on cash return, that usually pencils out anywhere from a 1 to maybe 3% or so cash on cash return on your invested down payment, which, if you remember, was that 10%. So now that we talked about those kind of cash flow numbers, let's talk about, well, is it still worth buying, this 3 families if you're not really getting that huge cash flow that, you would love to see on a multifamily. And here's what you have to think, first of all, right? So first of all, the right asset today, if you buy the right 3-family in the right location, right, an attractive location with plenty of growth upside, then you have to understand that even though you're not going to get that cash flow over a long period of time, right? I'd usually tell folks, you got to think in 3 to 5 year time frames when investing in real estate in Boston. Time has shown over and over again that if you own quality Boston assets, they are going to increase in value over time. And I know you probably read your Bigger Pockets blogs and all these great, intro to real estate books. And, they tell you, oh, don't chase appreciation, you got to chase cash flow. And, that's certainly a great thing to understand as a, newer investor. But what you have to remember is you are playing in one of the most desirable markets, not only maybe in the country, but maybe even in the world, right? I mean, Boston is up there. If you haven't seen my videos about why I'm so high on Boston, between all the different industries we have, the infrastructure we have, between education, healthcare, the different types of industries. I mean, I've done many videos on this. You can go check them out. But again, you got to remember, we are not, we're not playing in a game in like the Midwest. No offense if you're from the Midwest or, the southern states. This is one of the most prime and expensive markets in the country. So if you want to control some of the most prime real estate, yeah, you're probably not going to get a little cash flow, unfortunately. That's just part of the game. Now, to put this a little bit more contextually in terms of true financial returns, right? Because, I'd have this conversation with a lot of folks, and, this is my portfolio's all based in Boston. People wanted to see kind of the financials behind this argument. What I started doing for people is started calculating an average annual return if you were going to hold onto the property for 5 to 7 years. And that average annual return is basically just calculated by taking all the different cash flows you're going to get over the life of the building, right? Over the life of you owning the building, and you're dividing by the number of years to see what your yearly average annual return is on your invested cash. So not to get, again, too super technical with you guys, but basically to do this calculation, you have to make some very soft assumptions. And by the way, I make really low assumptions. So I assume that your property is going to increase by value by only 3% per year. That's half of inflation. So typically real estate at bare minimum increases with inflation. I'm literally saying, hey, we're going to get half of that increase. And then rents and expenses are going to increase by 2%, which is basically very low. We've been experiencing tremendous rent growth over the last number of years. So if you take those factors into account, then actually your average annual return on these kinds of 3-families is well over 30%, right? Think about that. Over 30% average annualized return if you're gonna do the full calculation of what is my average over the course of the life of you owning the investment. Again, in order to achieve that, this is why, if you guys have talked to me or if you've seen my videos, this is why I harp on location and the quality assets so much. Because honestly, that's gonna have the most impact onto your returns, right? Because if you buy in a premier location, in a good neighborhood, in a good street, and you buy a good building, right? That building is gonna be super attractive when it's your turn to go sell, let's say in 5-7 years down the road. And that's how you maximize returns in Boston, right? That is the game we play here. And if you're not thinking like that, then you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And finally, one last note I'll obviously put out there is, even though the cash flows are obviously pretty low today, just given that interest rates are really high, on the street, most people think that over the next 1 or 2 years, we're probably going to get some sort of rate stabilization, right? We'll probably have rates come down to somewhere in the mid-high 4s to 5% is kind of where a lot of bankers think we're going to end up. So of course, that's also not accounting for a refinance play, in 1 or 2 years when the rates get lowered. And of course, if you decrease your rate by 1 to 1.5%, you're gonna realize a ton more cash flow. So that was 3 families. Now let's move on to 2 families. And let's talk about the average 2-family, which for this example, I'm gonna say is, let's say, priced at around $800,000, right? And again, guys, for 2 families, $800,000, and 3 families around $1 million. The markets that I'm kind of referring to that a lot of you guys are interested in are your Reveres, Everett, Malden, Chelsea's, potentially Eastie, Dorchesters of the world, right? Of course, if you're going into nicer locations, like, Somerville, Cambridge, South Boston, those kinds of areas, of course, numbers are going to be different. But so for this example, let's say you've got an average property of about $800,000 that you're looking at, two family, and one of the units is going to rent out for $2,300 while you live there. And once you move out, you can get $2,800 per unit, right? So again, you're kind of inheriting a tenant that's maybe a few $100s below market. Again, very, very common in small multis. And when you move out, you're going to be able to get top dollar rents. So now when we do the financials, and again, we're including all expenses, right? Not only the PITI, but all the operating expenses that I listed before. And again, let's say you're going to put a 10% down owner occupant loan. Here's how the numbers stack out. It's going to cost you about $3,000 to $3,500 or so per month to owner occupy that two family. And then when you move out and lease the other unit, it's going to cost you about $500 per month to sit on that property with today's rates. Now we've obviously entered a little bit more of a significant negative cash flow scenario, which, we still want to avoid as much as possible. So here's a couple of thoughts that I've seen people implement to more successfully execute that strategy. Number one, if you're going to house hack a two family, I would probably suggest that even in your own unit, you look for ways to potentially rent out some rooms, right? So for example, let's say you're going to owner occupy and your unit is a 3-bedroom. Then what I've had a lot of my clients do is rent out an additional bedroom within their unit or 2 bedrooms, right? You could probably get about $1,000 to $1,100 per bedroom. And again, bring an extra $1,000 to $2,000 of income per month to offset some of that cost. So instead of it costing you $3,000 to $3,500 per month or so, it might cost you closer to $2,000 or $2,500 per month, which I think is a lot more reasonable for a house hack. Now, this is going to be pretty similar to, again, the cost of rent, but of course the difference is you're going to control an $800,000 building. You're going to be building a ton of equity into it every single month, right, as your debt gets paid down. One thing I'd even mentioned before in the 3-family conversation was the tax benefits, right? These are all pre-tax calculations, so all the write-offs that you're going to get and all the tax benefits that you get from owning real estate, that's going to be additional financial benefit you're going to receive, right? So basically between all that, if you're asking me, would I rather rent or control an asset for the same amount of money when I'm building up equity every single month, getting tax benefits? Of course, the answer is pretty clear that a 2-family house hack sounds pretty dang good. Now, if you're thinking about it, well, what happens if I need to move out and, all of a sudden I rent it out and I'm losing a couple $100? Obviously that is not an ideal scenario today. And, we try to maximize the cash flows so that at bare minimum, we push break even, right? Because no one wants to lose money on a month-to-month basis to hold an asset. But a couple of things to think about. Number one, again, like I said before, rates are probably going to stabilize in the next 1 to 2 years. So you could probably take a decently good bet that, your interest, you'll be able to refi into an interest rate that's probably about 1 to 1.5% lower than where you're going to purchase today, right? Which is going to free up a significant amount of cash flow. Number two, and this is kind of the crazy calculation, this is kind of where the things get crazy. Even if you look at average annual returns with some negative cash flows as you rent out your building, the thing is, even with 3% annual appreciation, right? I mean, the average annual returns on these properties, again, assuming you buy a quality asset that you can resell at a good price down the line, average annual returns are still in the high 20% up to 30% that I've seen on average, right? So you are still making an incredible average annual return, again, if you have a long-term mindset. Now look, obviously you've got to be pretty financially strong in order to be able to sit on this, right? Because this is expensive real estate, right? And expensive real estate is not easy to sit on, especially with high interest rates, right? So if you're someone that maybe doesn't have quite the cash flow coming in from your income, from your job or other income sources, then yeah, maybe this is not necessarily the game for you to play, right? But if you can, then you could still see that you are hitting incredibly strong average annual returns on your investment if you have that long-term view of sitting on these properties for 5-7 years or so. So again, those of you guys that are bigger pockets diehards and all that, and are all about those kind of cash flow metrics, this is if that's kind of your stance, then this is just going to be a very tough market for you to play in, right? But for those of you that understand the game, that you're in a different ball game in Boston, right? It's very different in Boston versus pretty much every other market in the country, except for maybe New York, LA, and a handful of other markets, right? You are in a different ball game, and you are trying to invest in some of the most premier locations and some of the most desirable locations in the country, really, right? So if that doesn't get you excited, the fact that again you can control this assets, $900,000 assets for 10% down, and still have very, very high average annual return projections. I mean, if that doesn't get you excited, then you know what, this is just simply not for you, and that's totally fine. Now, before I move on to the condo side, one other very, very important note I want to throw it out there, because you're probably thinking about it and you're probably saying to yourself, well, look, if you think the rates are going to come down in 1 to 2 years, why don't I just wait, buy then, lock in the rate then, and then I don't have to like experience any sort of potential negative cash flow. And here's what I'll tell you is that's not a bad train of thought, but most likely, right, and this is my opinion, of course, but you know, I think if we see rates go down, what's gonna happen is the market prices are gonna skyrocket up, right? Because obviously a lot of this pricing turbulence that we've had over the last half a year or 8 months or so has been caused because of the rates going up. So if the rates are truly brought down over the next 1 to 2 years, and you're saying, well, I'm gonna go buy then I think you're gonna be faced with much, much higher pricing, right? So not only are you gonna miss on the equity side and the equity growth that comes with it, but you're also gonna be, you know, even though your mortgage's interest rate is gonna be lower, your price is gonna be higher. So honestly, your cash flows might be the same if you decide to buy it in a couple of years down the road. So of course, that's just my opinion, but I think it makes a lot of sense. And that's why I would say that argument does not necessarily make a ton of sense. Now I'm gonna zip through this last point, which is about condos. So I know a lot of you guys are also thinking about condos. And for the sake of this argument, what I'm gonna be doing is, let's say you're thinking about buying a $650,000 condo in a pretty good location around the city, right? Because, you know, those of you guys that reach out to me about condos, you're typically looking at markets like Somerville, Medford, good parts of Dorchester, South Boston, right? So, you know, I think mid 600s is a pretty good estimate. Of course, if you're gonna go buy a condo in Everett, Revere, Malden, Chelsea's of the world, you know, your price is gonna be significantly lower, probably like around 500,000. So, you know, your mortgage payment's gonna be lower. But for the sake of this video, let's say $650,000 condo where you're gonna be putting 10% down. Now, the way the financials stack out is your PITI and condo fee altogether are gonna be around $4,000 to $4,200 per month. So you may be thinking that is pretty high, and I would agree, that is kind of a high number. But again, if you're gonna be buying a condo in this location, then I think you have to get creative, right? And what I've had a lot of clients do in the past is rent out an additional bedroom within their condo, right? So, you know, if you go buy a Somerville 2-bedroom or a Savin Hill JFK UMass in Dorchester 2-bedroom condo, you know, I would rent out the second bedroom. You're gonna, let's say, get $1,100, $1,200. So instead of paying $4,000 to $4,200, maybe you're paying around closer to $3,000 per month on your condo. Now, of course, the cost of living is a little bit higher than in those multifamilies, right? Because on those multifamilies, you can probably get it down to the mid 2s. But the other thing too is with these condos, typically it's a lot less stressful. There's a lot less maintenance that needs to be done, right? It's a much more turnkey investment that needs a lot less management and maintenance over a long period of time. Not to get super into the weeds of it again, in terms of whether it makes sense to hold on to the rental down the line, that's gonna be a little bit more up to you, right? I mean, condos I see kind of 50-50. I see some people just deciding to sell when they're ready to move out. And remember, on condo side, if you live there as an owner occupant, you're gonna take those gains tax-free, right? So that's big. Some people, of course, do try to keep their units as rentals. It's certainly possible. As the rentals, these condos don't work as well with 10% down loans, honestly. You're losing a decent amount of money every month, like $600-700. Obviously, if the rates stabilize and let's say you can refinance into a 5% rate or so, right, then you're gonna be inching closer and closer towards that break-even number. But again, the argument stays the same. If you buy that quality condo in a quality location that's gonna be desirable, yeah, you know what, even if you, the math says that even if you lose a couple $100 every month here or there, right, over the long term, you're gonna make money, right? And I'll give you guys this final example. I know I've rambled on a lot in this video, but I'll give you guys this one final example about how I like to think about it, right? let's say you're keeping your condo as a rental. Let's say it costs you $300 a month, right? You're losing. So over every year, you're losing $3,500 per year in cash flow, right? So let's say over the course of 5 years, 3,500 times 5 is, let's call it 17.5, right? 18,000 bucks. So let's say that condo is going to cost you $18,000 over 5 years to hold. Now think about it like this, right? This is the easiest way I like to help people think about it. Let's say you're getting that minimum 3% per year growth on your condo value, right? And again, that 3% is half of inflation. If that's what you end up getting on average, like something's wrong. But let's just say it's 3%. Then what is 3% every year on a $650,000 condo? It's about $20,000, right? So every year you're actually getting about $20,000 in equity appreciation, which if you multiply over 5 is going to be about 100 grand. So now you can kind of see the math stack out. I know I've emphasized this a lot in this video. This all roots in the idea that you buy a quality unit in a quality location, right? Because if you buy something that's not so good or not really in a good location, then your growth is going to be dampened, right? You're not going to be able to achieve that maximum growth. But if you buy a really solid unit in a growth market, and all these markets I talked about, I am super, super high on, I do see some incredible potential. So that's my financial breakdown of all these different house hacking strategies. Again, you obviously have to get a lot more creative today because of the higher interest rates, but don't let the low cash flow or even potentially a little negative cash flow deter you, right? I think if you've got a long-term view and you can hold on to units for 5, 6, 7 years, you're gonna make a lot of money over the long run if you buy the right buildings. And how do you know if you're buying the right buildings? You gotta make sure you reach out to me because I'll make sure you buy the best stuff. So hopefully that's helpful, guys. I know this is a long one, but if you've watched this whole thing, I hope this is a helpful breakdown for you guys. Of course, if you have any questions, make sure you put them in the comments below and I will definitely help you out.